Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is July 1, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank Willie Schwartz for introducing him to today's guest, Warren Senders. Where are you calling from, Warren?
I live in Medford, Massachusetts. It's a few miles outside of Boston to the northwest.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Other human beings.
Dude, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. I appreciate that answer. That is amazing. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I live surrounded by books.
Yeah.
And I've been a compulsive reader my whole life. As a general rule, I always have at least 3 books going simultaneously, because that way, if I accidentally finish 2 books simultaneously, I'm not in a state where, oh my God, I have nothing to read.
Did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to? They did it as an example, or on your own?
Yes.
All 3?
All 3.
Yeah.
I grew up in a hyper-literate family surrounded by books. And so for us, books are a staple.
Yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
We collect and gather information because it gives us power and agency over that information, and because it allows our pattern-seeking propensities to have something on which to work.
Wow. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think that a question of innateness is actually a reflection of a species long process of invention. That is, that pattern seeking is evolutionarily beneficial for us, and so we have invented it and thereby made it innate.
Wow. Let me be clear. You're saying we invented pattern recognition, pattern seeking.
No, I do not think that. I think
Okay,
that to some extent, any creature that has a survival instinct
yeah.
requires pattern recognition in order to be able to maximize its opportunities of survival and reproductive fitness.
Yeah.
Human beings therefore have that, and then it's been evolutionarily beneficial to us to maximize that and to give it a lot of different things on which we can apply it, or to which we can apply it.
You mean I can't just sit under an apple tree and ohm for the rest of my life?
You can, baby. That's up to you.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Emotions are a way of thinking that doesn't involve conscious parts of the brain. I mean, the stuff that controls our emotions is in the brain. Right? So emotion is a form of knowledge. And if you've had a dream where you've had a strong emotion that emerges from something, that's an aspect of a thought process. To me, emotion, like, let us say that melody and rhythm are the primary components of a musical line or gesture, but the timbre of that musical line or gesture is integral to its nature. If you hear a melody played on a trumpet as opposed to being sung or played on a bagpipe or a bassoon or whatever. So emotions is yet another dimension of how our thoughts work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're going to get into music somewhere down the line, but you really answered a question I was going to ask, but we'll get into it. And I just wanted to interject this one. New Yorker magazine had an article several months ago about people wondering whether children dream inside the womb, or is experience outside the womb kind of needed in order to dream? Your guess or hunch?
My guess is that the neurological mechanisms that support dreaming are probably in place before the child is born. But then, if all you have is a surrounding that's steady state and not much in the way of inputs, then it would be very hard to tell, to make a distinction between what you're dreaming and what your waking life is like. How does a newborn know whether it's awake or conscious? It doesn't.
that's Robin Williams called it womb service. and the Cap Beefheart said, I don't want to come out, I'm staying in here, it's too good.
I hear you.
Fill in the blank, Warren. I don't know what I think until I...
Depends on what idiom I'm thinking in. If I'm John Maynard Keynes, then I don't know what I think until I say it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know what I think until I write it. Sometimes I don't know what I think until I sing it or play it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my response is, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. And I love sing and play. There's the great cliche, if you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it.
Right.
How do you know that John, who said that? Do you know indeed he said that? He doesn't know what he thinks until he writes it?
I believe that it is John Maynard Keynes, the economist, who said, how do I know? He's British, so it must be, how do I know what I think until I hear myself say it?
Oh, he says say it. Okay, I got to look that up. That's good to know. Is he a good guy or a bad guy?
He's a good guy. He's a good
guy. Not to make value judgments. Everybody's good.
No,
right?
We know what page we're on, But see, the thing is, like someone like Temple Grandin and her book Thinking in Pictures,
Yeah.
It's clear that for her, it's not about thinking is not something that you say. Thinking is like connected series of visualizations. How does she know what she thinks until she draws it, or until she makes it?
Draws it and make it, man. Those are two I rarely get. That is beautiful. Yeah, I should ask her all these questions. I love her. That is deep, dude. I'm glad you brought that up. Draw it or make it. I like this woman said, I don't know what I think until I ran about it for 30 minutes.
That works. Part of the process of what we call thinking out loud is that's a little bit like, taking a big block of marble and taking away everything that doesn't look like an elephant. You keep chipping away at it and try stuff out, and it comes out of your mouth. You go, no, not that.
Yeah.
And then occasionally, if you're lucky, you say something and then realize immediately afterward that it's true.
Yeah.
But that's, I've had several of those over the course of my 67 years on the planet. So,
yeah, I like that. My favorite is McLuhan saying, you mean my whole fallacy's wrong? Can humans think without language?
You have two undefined variables in your question. We don't know what think is, and we don't know what language is. If you define thinking as something that you do with language, then tautologically the answer is no. And if you define language as something that has to be thought, then again the answer is no.
That's Warren, that's the magazine we grew up on, Man Magazine. It says the English language is the only language where a double negative is a no-no.
Yeah.
Chomsky says language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
When I was living in India, and I would, in some cases I'd be traveling and I would be in a place where my spoken Hindi was not up to the task, then you rely a lot on gestures and smiling.
Yeah,
When I'm working with musicians trying to get an idea across and notation doesn't do it and verbal explanation doesn't do it, then I'll have to dance it out or create a little drama. Um, but all of these, I think, also point us in the direction of analogy and metaphor.
yeah,
And the more that we explore these questions, the more that it forces us to consider what it was that we were actually trying to convey in the first place.
yeah,
Much of the time, what we think we want to say is it's kind of like uh, when Alice is talking to Humpty Dumpty, and the question of, well, what's the name of the song? Yes, but what is the name of the song called?
yeah,
And so there's all these levels of meta referentiality, and we've had it demonstrated to us over and over again over the past 35 years of Fox News and civic discourse that simply saying what you need to say in a clear and logical and sequential way to people does not do anything at all in terms of persuading them of the validity of your point of view.
yeah.
So
Really good. T.S. Eliot says, when I talk to you, I got to use words. And it's not true, but I love you bringing up analogy and metaphor because Marsh McLuhan says that all words are metaphorical. All words are metaphorical. So, my question to you is, what is the word literal a metaphor for?
well, of course, literal now means something other than what it actually means. Uh, the etymology of it suggests that it's something in a book, or something written, or something read. And our use of the word to describe a thing that really happened, like I was literally outside and it was literally raining on me. The word, we're using it as a synonym for actually, and that suggests that we have a print bias in our language,
Yeah,
where how do I know what's true unless I see it written down?
yeah.
And I don't know what to do about that other than observe it and shake my head sadly at the ways in which language both betrays and supports us in our quest to make sense of the world around us.
Warren, you're great. I appreciate your time here because it also evoked the McLuhan rephrasing of Robert Browning. Our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is heaven for? And Marshall said, our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is a metaphor?
Nice. Well, it's useful to remember that in the original Greek, metaphor meant a vehicle for taking things from place to place.
Yeah,
And so it's a little truck.
yeah.
In India, the thing that's called a metaphor in Greece is called a tempo.
How do you spell that?
Just Tempo.
Tempo is the
Yeah.
word for metaphor in India?
No, tempo is the word for small three-wheeled truck that you use for taking
Oh,
from place to place. We were going to get into some serious metaphorical thickets there, right?
that is good, truck.
Uh, Nicholas Slonimsky said that one of the words, one of the meanings of idiot in Greek is a table for one at a restaurant. Uh,
You mean literally? You mean he was joking? That's one of his jokes?
with Slonimsky, it was really hard to tell.
Dude, I had some great experiences with him.
Oh, he was the cat. He was the absolute cat. He was the
Did you
cat.
know him? Did you know him?
I had breakfast with him in LA in 1992.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
And we could go on for him for hours, but a table for one in a restaurant. Uh yeah, Frank Zappa brought him up on stage at the Santa
right.
Monica Civic. And that was
He recounted that in his autobiography.
Yeah, but
Perfect
he says
Pitch.
there were 10,000 kids screaming for me, and it was usually 10 old women at the Hollywood Bowl, and 5 of them were sleeping. In the Santa Monica Civic only seats 3,000. So he exaggerated 10,000. I love that. He thought I was a rock star. They didn't, I was there. It didn't matter who Frank brought out, they would clap,
Right.
And then he came out and he did like a Cecil Taylor piano solo, and that was amazing. A real hero for me.
Yep.
I dumpster dove that book once. Where were we? We are asking you what your observations of humans in general. Are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
We already covered that a little bit. I think that feeling refers to emotions, and emotion is one of the ingredients of the package of thought.
Yeah,
Uh, I would not be so blasé or uh, 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 so uh, what would be the correct word? I would not uh, be so arrogant as to assume that my model of what thinking feels like to me should be definitional for everybody else.
yeah,
Uh, there's 8 billion of us on the planet, and all our fingerprints are different.
yeah,
And I've never met two people whose neurological or cognitive processes were anything more than roughly mappable onto someone else's.
yeah.
And in my work as a music teacher, I have never encountered two people who had the same what I call error profile, which is the combination of ways that people make mistakes.
Era profile, is that a term in neuroscience or something, or you just made that up?
I just made that up. I'm a music teacher, so I
Error.
realize, yeah, the error profile. My father was a worldwide expert in human error, so he used to do human error wholesale. I do it in retail.
You do it in retail. What was your dad's first name?
John.
John Senders?
John Senders, yes.
Okay, very good. Because most people, Warren, I go, what, are we more thinking or more feeling? 80%, 90% of people go, I think we're more feeling beings. And Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? There's a bumper sticker on a car on my street and says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Don't think everything you believe. all of these all of these words, the thing is that all of those words, think, believe, feel, those are all verbs, and
Yeah,
verbs by definition refer to processes. And
yeah,
so when we try and interpret a phrase like, are we more thinking beings or feeling beings or whatever, what we're being asked to do is to reify a whole bunch of these very fluid concepts. And no matter what we do, we're going to wind up uh, 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 grasping the winged life and not
yeah.
letting it fly.
Wow. I think it's American Indians, Indigenous. Somebody says, or someone told me they don't have any verbs. And Bucky Fuller says the opposite. He says, I seem
I
to
seem
be
to be a verb. Yeah,
a verb. Yeah,
right. Pivotal
beautiful.
moment in my life was playing percussion on stage with Bucky Fuller in 1979 while he danced.
Oh my God, Bucky danced. Was it Clunky White Boy or was it Soulful Get Down?
Well, I mean, Bucky was a clunky white boy, but he was very soulful, and he was dancing. He was dancing on stage with Brother Blue,
Wow.
and
That's,
you know, I was 19 at the time, and
yeah.
it's been all downhill ever since then.
No, it's Warren. I had the same experience about the same time in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Bucky spoke at Hill Auditorium, and I fell asleep. It was the best nap I ever took in my life.
Oh, sure.
And my friend saw him speak in the Bahamas with McLuhan and everybody. He spoke for 8 hours, and then
Yeah.
they clapped, and he spoke for another 8 hours. Thank God for Bucky. Okay, you got ESP, Warren. You anticipate the next question beautifully. 2 from Alan Turing in the 50s. 1, is thinking a function of the soul?
I don't even know how to answer that. If I had to offer a picture of my own view on where self-identity resides, I would probably, more than anything else, I'd go with Douglas Hofstadter's framing that our self-identity emerges as a function of the human brain's ability to think about its own thinking.
Yeah.
So that, of all the formulations that I've read, all the attempts to formulate that, Hofstadter and Daniel Dennett probably have the view of what consciousness is that resonates the best with my own experience and inquiry.
What's Daniel's last name again?
Daniel Dennett.
Dennett. Okay.
Right. He's the philosopher at Tufts. He died earlier this year or late last year.
Yeah. In the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Again, depends on how you define think.
Yeah.
There's a story, I think Pete Seeger tells it in one of his books, that there were these Native American airplane mechanics who were working on these planes, and they got really good results. The planes never seemed to malfunction when these guys worked on them. And people who were interviewing them found that they regarded the planes as conscious. And they would say, she's not feeling good.
Yeah.
Listening to the engine, and they would say it's not
Yeah.
feeling right. And all of us have used an anthropomorphic fallacy or a pathetic fallacy with regards to, so to speak, inanimate objects, when it's like, this frickin' car is really angry at me today. So if that's the case, if we can use our own minds to imagine that an inanimate object is angry at us or is stubborn, the door handle is stubborn, the lock on my door is recalcitrant, this faucet is very persnickety, you are defining states of feeling and ascribing them to objects.
Yeah.
So if feeling is a form of thought, then yes, but I think that those things are emergent properties that arrive from our interaction with the objects.
Yeah. Let's go back. You used the word self-identity. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Both Krishnamurti and McLuhan said it. Identity is the human search. No, excuse me. Violence is the human search for identity. Any thoughts on that in regards to self-identity, identity?
Well, Krishnamurti, if I recall correctly, said also something like, when you define yourself as different from me according to this way or that way, you've committed an act of violence.
Oh, that's probably partly what.
So I think that's what he means.
He means.
I don't know what McLuhan meant by it.
Yeah.
If what we mean is separating,
Yeah.
that is like the root of the verb decide is to kill the alternatives.
Oh, wow. To kill alternatives. Wow.
Then yeah, I mean, I guess, but on the other hand, I'm not convinced that violence as a word deserves to have such a broad interpretive drapery atop it. I would rather keep violence, so to speak, locked up in the frames of uh, direct physical action or causing direct physical consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple things, Warren. Mallarmé said to suggest is to create, to define is to kill. And I love this. Decide etymologically means to kill alternatives, something like that.
Well, I'm a little sketchy. I forget exactly where I heard that,
Yeah.
but I mean it makes sense because of the side suffix.
Yeah.
Um, so
But Alan Watts says everybody's trying to figure out who they are. If you figure out who you are, you're fucked. And I just wrote an essay called "Can Art Stop War?" and it's all about Maria Gambudis and Rianne Eisler and Chelsea the Blade saying we're more hardwired to be cooperative than we are violent. I mean, most people. I know your activism. What I've seen online is totally inspiring, and I love it. And I think most people go, we're hardwired to fight. We need to, and I was like, no, we're more hardwired to cooperate.
I think that there are. We do not have an accurate picture of what human beings' lives would be like if they were not almost universally inflected by trauma. If you look at our history as a species, then you can see, well, gee, when my father was growing up, uh, even the wealthiest families could reasonably enough expect to lose children in their youth. My father was born in 1920.
Yeah,
And so, you know, it would be inconceivable for a child growing up between 1920 and 1930 not to have former playmates who were dead.
I see.
That was, I mean, kids die. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and then when we grew up, it was like I remember the one girl in our grade school died, and everybody freaked out. It wasn't a
Right,
common thing. Yeah,
right. And similarly, we had we're evolving definitions of consent in intimate relationships,
yeah,
which were not functional for large parts of our human lifespan or our species lifespan. And so we don't actually know what people would be like if they didn't have all this stuff that they were still processing, because parental trauma or grandparental trauma or great grandparental trauma or umpty ump times trauma still gets passed down to us. It gets passed on to us in the form of culture, in the form of individual behaviors and bodily quirks and all these things. So we have a completely a very temporally narrow focus on what we consider normative. That
yeah,
is, I consider normative to grow up in the suburbs with playmates who were always alive
yeah,
and with parents who were able to divorce rather than spend the rest of their lives in a bitter, decaying, dysfunctional wreck of a marriage.
yeah,
Right? They figured out how to get out of it while the getting was reasonably good,
yeah,
and and that's normal. But 100 years ago, none of those things would have been normal.
yeah,
So I mean, honestly, we have no way of knowing whether we're more bonobos or more chimps.
yeah. But
We don't have
yeah,
a separate way to run the tape.
yeah.
Right? There's no control group.
But I just started a deep dive into this word suffering because all the people in my discussion group say, oh, Dylan says the human condition is suffering, and even Buddha says that. So is suffering and trauma kind of related? And let's go off on these three quotes about suffering. First of all, you can distinguish if you want first, or we can just delve right into the suffering, and then you can talk about trauma and suffering.
Well, I think trauma is. I would, as I'm working my way through this, I have to wait until I say it to know what I think. But
Yeah,
um, it seems to me that trauma presents as the action of an external agent or force on us. That is, trauma is something that is done to us.
Yeah. Okay. Outside agent. Yeah. Done
Right.
to. Yeah.
And suffering can be something that you create from inside yourself. Um, and that's the Buddhistic concept that it's tied in with desire. And
Oh, Buddha says it's with desire.
then, you know, does stubbing my toe constitute suffering? What did Buddha think when he stubbed his toe? I have no idea. Because that gets kind of reductive. It's like, I desire not to have stubbed my toe. Well, all is one. I'm not sure what to do with that.
Well, Warren, talking to you is like the guy goes to his guru and he says, "What's the best question I can ask you?" And he goes, "The one you just asked me."
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the first one. This is Kurt Schwitter, Dada surrealist collage artist. Yep. Every period must redeem itself because it suffers in itself alone.
Every period?
Yeah, every period of, my friend yesterday, he says, you mean as a grammar, every period? Yeah. He took it into another realm, but it's basically saying that each historical period has a unique challenge or suffering. So like I grew up in the Dada and the Surrealists had the biggest impact on me. Then it took me 30, 40, 50 years before he goes, that's horrible. War is what caused surrealism. I love this art movement. Would there have been Dada and surrealism without war? So the suffering is how the era, each era, let's say, has some sort of suffering. And does that distinguish, that period? And then the arts and the music kind of, okay, how do we deal with this suffering?
Most of the time when a period, and I'm putting those in real strong air quotes, when a period is happening, people don't go around going, oh, it looks like we're in the middle of this movement now. those things are inventions of historians and cultural historians and commentators. And so then what's really happening is that I think is what happens invariably, which is that people, whenever and wherever they live, are engaged in trying to make sense out of a whole host of conflicting impulses and stimuli and forces outside their control. And they're trying to get from the beginning of their lives to the end of their lives with while retaining a sense of balance. And then what cultural historians say about it afterwards probably has more to do with the period in which the cultural historians are writing than it does with the period in which the people actually lived.
Really good point. That's you also evoked for me the McLuhan loves. The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. And I said that to, you might know him, David Moss.
Mm-hmm. The percussionist?
Yeah, he said New Guinea have no word for music. They do everything. They do everything. They just do it. It's not like we're going to go do music now. So
it's also the case, however, that we're all familiar with that canard about how the Inuit languages have some arbitrarily high number of words for snow. The Eskimos have 37 words for snow, but it's also completely reasonable to say that they have no word for snow, because what they have instead is a word for squeaky underfoot, bad for hunting, good for making igloos because it clumps, light and dusty, don't want to get it inside your mask because it'll sting your eyes, and whatever else there are. I'm not an Inuit, but so the Balinese probably have many words that refer to the condition of being artistic or making art. But why would they need the generic any more than fish need a word for water?
Dude, you covered the waterfront there. I mean, we could end right there. You did it all. But that's amazing because it's like, well, that's Joyce in Finnegan's Wake. Love thy label as thyself. Yeah, 30. Yeah, no, well, that's I heard Aborigines in Australia have no word for boredom. Does that mean they don't get bored? No, they probably get bored, but again, as you sussed it out in a bit bigger context.
Well, John Holt, in one of his books on education, was very firm that when we regard boredom as an enemy, then we are losing touch with one of the great creative forces.
Hello. That's
Boredom is a kind of dissatisfaction with a status quo.
Yeah.
And therefore it is an enormous creative motivator.
Yeah.
And so
that's yeah, George Carlin said, "Whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window?"
Right.
And it's like I updated. I says, "Whatever happened to letting kids stare at their cell phone? They have to stare at these things, and there could be nothing on there. It's just their window. It's just like their kind of thing to stare at."
With the caveat that if there's a steady flow of stimuli of 15 to 20 seconds length that cycles through that, then the opportunity for genuinely productive boredom doesn't arise.
Yeah. But their battery could be out, and they just whip it out and stare at it, and like, oh, I have to stare at my cell phone.
Yeah.
And be normal. I used to ride down the alley, and somebody would be staring at their cell phone at 6 in the morning. I go, stare at the fucking clouds, and they're like, oh, another kook. It's like, okay, so here's Tom Waits. I believe beautiful melodies. No, I like beautiful melodies telling me terrible things. The world is a hellish place, and bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering. Now it's sort of like I'm sort of seeing what's your take on that. The quality of our suffering. Doesn't suffering connotate something negative that you wouldn't have quality?
I think that what he means there is not that suffering is something good, but rather the quality, as in the qualitas.
What's that mean?
Bad writing destroys the internal integrity of our suffering.
Oh, the internal integrity. Yeah.
Right. So the quality of this tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, something can be awful, but if it is, or something can be very depressing or very bleak, or transform your mood in a particular way. And bad writing, if in that formulation, is taking bad things and describing them badly.
Yeah.
So that what results from that is a lack of agency in one's own mind about how to encompass that suffering. Yeah. Suffering is transformed when we turn it into narrative, or we turn it into creative production.
Yeah.
And if the original nature of the suffering is incoherent, then it takes much more work to turn it into something worthy of our production.
Yeah. It's like Jello Biafra for Dead Kennedys writing "Kill the Poor." And then a couple months ago, they were killing the poor. And I was like, don't take it literally, please. But right. He was doing it satirically. But he has no control. Once he puts it out in the world, someone could say that I heard that in a song and I'm going to go do that. And
hey, I read Jonathan Swift and now I'm eating Irish babies.
Okay, enough on suffering, but the last one my friend told me yesterday. Jung says you grow the most through suffering. Come on, the kind of music you do, Warren, it feels like it comes totally out of ecstatic joy. I don't know the history of all their feelings. We learned it, like I learned it from like you. We first heard Ravi Shankar and went, holy shit, this is amazing. And
Well, there's plenty of suffering in there, and of course, it all stems from desire because when I started studying Indian music, there were all these beautiful things that I heard that I couldn't do, and then there I was, you know, my 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 reach exceeded my grasp very greatly, and so that made me unhappy.
yeah,
And I lived in India, and first I was affiliated with someone who wasn't a functional teacher, very famous person, and uh, I had all kinds of stuff that happened there, and that that qualifies as suffering in a sense. And then that guy had gone through all kinds of trials and tribulations to get what he got. And you read the early history of some of the Indian music masters. Ali Akbar Khan's father was like a completely like a sociopath. you know right.
really,
I mean, well, if you didn't practice, then he'd like beat you with a stick. Ali Akbar Khan, fails to execute an ornament, and his father ties him to a tree for 3 days. And I mean,
yeah,
again, this goes back into the idea of what happens in our lives that constitutes trauma. Um,
yeah,
and I was very fortunate that my real teacher of Hindustani music, Sri Ram Devastani, was very kind and generous to me, and I think recognized that, you know, it was inherent in my nature that I was going to pay a bunch of dues anyway. Um, so, I mean, we carry our sufferings with us wherever they go. That's just the nature of unfulfilled desires and aspirations and the things that we want. A creative itch that has to be scratched is a form of suffering, if you will.
yeah,
And, and then some days my voice doesn't cooperate.
yeah.
Some days like acid reflux starts acting up, and then I have like dysphonia on the vocal cords. And then, even just getting a single sustained note is like really hard work. And then I feel despair. You mean
Oh,
I'm going to face the end of the world and I won't even be able to sing? Oh, fuck. Right. But then there's a nice, I had a conversation many years ago about two of the important Hindustani ragas. Uh, one raga is called Bilas Khani Todi. And Bilas Khani Todi is a raga that is meant to be sung in moments of extreme and immediate grief. That is, if if a member of your family dies, you sing Bilas Khani Todi that day because it helps you process the grief. But and so this it was a guy named Sayan Bhattacharya, and he said, and I'll never forget this. He was talking about the difference between raga Bilas Khani Todi and then the raga Darbari Kannada, which Darbari is an adjective meaning of the emperor's court, the Darbar. So it is a variety of the Kannada raga, which is meant to be sung for the emperor. And he said, Sayan said to me, the grief of Darbari Kannada is it has been spread out. It is a diffuse grief that comes with the responsibility for an entire country. The grief of Bilas Khani Todi is raw and immediate. And he said, the one who lives Bilas Khani Todi has not yet reached an equation with his grief. And the
wow.
one who lives Darbari Kannada has reached an equation with his grief.
What's the word for equation? A remedy? I'm not understanding equation.
It means that you've found a way to balance the
To
grief,
balance.
right? So that you have rationalized it in the
Yeah,
sense of creating a ratio. And
yeah.
Bilas Khani Todi, the day that my teacher died, I was in America, and my one of the other people I knew who had studied with him, he received a call from our teacher's son, who passed the word, and he called me and he said, Guruji died, and we had been expecting it because he'd been sick for a long time, and I had a whole day of teaching beginners, And I was like, well, Guruji would not want me to give up teaching just because of the inconvenient fact that he had died.
Yeah.
So I taught an entire day of good, solid beginner repertoire to all the beginners. And my last student of the day was an advanced student, and he came in, and I said, "We're doing something new, and I don't ask any questions." And I began teaching him Bilas Kanitori
Wow.
because I really needed
Yeah.
to sing it, because that is how you reach an equation with your grief, is you sing
Yeah.
Bilasani Todi. You
Yeah.
sing it when you don't have the equation. But the idea of Darbari Kannada as the raga, and it is said in Indian music circles, Hindustani music circles, that you can't sing Darbari accurately until you've reached a certain age.
Yeah.
And the implication of that is that it's about looking at the consequences of your life decisions,
Yeah.
and being ready to accept them. So the Emperor Ashoka, looking at the hundreds of thousands of war dead and realizing that he had created or fostered this tragedy, and then having a spiritual awakening and embracing the pathway of Dharma. That is sort of the conceptual model for reaching an equation with your grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
that is, to me, that's what singing Darbari Kannada means, is that you find a way to do that. For me as a climate activist, then that means I have to find a way to rationalize that somehow in my own life. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm going to get up. I'm still talking, but I'm going to walk into the other room and get myself a glass of water.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing, Warren, I wanted to say is I welcome tangents, stories, anecdotes, and it's really me and you versus the wordings on the question. So you
Yep.
get it completely. We're psychoanalyzing how I worded these things. Now,
Sure.
I want to go back. Like, you don't have to answer the question; they're just prompts. But I wanted to go back to Ali Akbar Khan because I learned his name through Henry Kaiser, the
Yes.
avant-garde guitarist, who said, "Here's the people I listen to." You know, instead of Jimmy, the normal guitar, he said Ali Akbar Khan. And I was like, wow. So that's when I started listening to him. Now that's the same Ali Akbar Khan, and he taught at Mills College.
Yeah, you need to eliminate the spoonerism. It's Ali Akbar Khan, not Ali Akbar Kar.
Okay, the spooner. I don't know if I could ever eliminate any spoonerisms in my life. I can't even speak my fucking language. The other one is goes right to the tuba throat singers, who I love that whole story, how Fennyman brought them to LA and they were in the Rose Bowl parade. Then they were ended up at Frank Zappa's house jamming with Frank. And we went and saw them in a park in Pasadena. And these guys, are transcendental with their sound. And I'm like,
They're very raw. They're basically punks.
yeah. But
They're
here's
completely unfiltered.
but here's the thing, because you touched on this, and I was wondering if it's similar. I heard they're only singing about three things: horses, boots, and their boots in the snow. And someone said, "Well, not really." But how do you process that? You were talking about that just before with the Eskimo wordage. How would you process me saying that they're singing about three things: horses, boots, and their snow?
The uh, the word that's doing the heavy lifting there is about.
Yeah.
And it is it's a very powerful feature of human language, and especially human sung language, that song language allows us to create structures of meaning that carry more than one meaning at a time.
Right.
So
We
in India, if you sing about the rain,
yeah.
because the monsoon is very eagerly awaited,
Yeah.
then it carries a raft of connotations.
Yeah.
If you're waiting for the rain to arrive, you are also waiting for your lover to arrive.
Yeah.
And the lover in Indian vernacular songs is always a stand-in for Krishna. So if you just sing, I wish it would rain, it's so dry, I wish it would rain, you're also saying, I wish my honey were back home and I desire to achieve union with God.
Yeah.
And that's just in the phrase, I wish it would rain.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very impoverished piece of lyricism that doesn't have at least two and usually three or more not entirely contradictory, but sometimes seemingly contradictory, or at the very least distinct meanings.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can sing about horses, but that's like saying that preteen girls drawing horses in the schoolrooms where I grew up, that they were all about horses, right? And Dr. Freud might have something to say about that, right? Any more than the boys drawing Shelby muscle cars were really just drawing cars.
Like, Warren, you're like, you took Allman Brothers and Johnny Cash through Ornette and Sun Ra, and then you said, I'm going Indian. Then you've actually gone full circle to being a scientist of language. You're a linguist in a lot of ways, so it's really a joy having this time with you. And we say what you just said in a way, words evoke more than their meaning.
Right.
Okay, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
No.
No, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it? I know it's both. Just is there a little fudging, like a little more detecting or a little more creating, or 50-50 equal?
Detecting it is creating it.
Yeah, okay. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of light, I would guess.
Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? It doesn't have to be tangible.
I don't know how many new tools there are. For me, one of the most powerful tools has been training myself to think in a wide variety of timescales. And I believe that our modern age of communications has corrupted our ability to shift temporality. And it's made it harder for us to enjoy instants, and it's made it harder for us to apprehend millennia or eons. And so I think that an extremely powerful tool is like the ability of a geologist to look at a mountain range and see it as an ongoing process. I have a student who's a mason, and he said, Warren, you look at it and you see it as a wall with rocks in it. I look at it and I see a very slow liquid.
Wow.
And I've been very fortunate. I have students who say really heavy things. So I think that uh, an expanded sense of temporality
Yeah.
is one of the most powerful things that we can bring to our thinking. And then correlated with that is an expanded notion of what uh, systems are.
Yeah.
Gregory Benford said that human beings have invented ways of communicating across long spans of time, and we call that culture. That's culture is the tool that we use for communicating with people who aren't born yet and with people who are dead.
Is that Benford?
Right.
Oh my God. Because that's McLuhan's book called Culture is Our Business.
Well, this is in a book called Deep Time.
Deep time. Yeah. I got to check that. Yeah.
And so uh, to me, that ties in with, for example, the work of the Long Now Foundation and the Clock of the Long Now and so on. That stuff is very interesting and inspirational to me.
Yeah.
And I regard uh, the work that I have done as as someone who explores the musical applications of systems theory um, is uh, is the idea. I like to use the metaphor of or the analogy of moire patterns.
Yeah.
When we impose a taxonomic grid on our lived and felt experience, or on the lived and felt collective experience of history and society, um, that yields a certain amount of information that has been quantized because of the nature of the grid. But when you impose two or more grids on the same phenomena at the same time, then you get resultant patterns that are extremely unpredictable.
Yeah.
So, what happens if you combine? I don't know. Just grabbing two things out of the hat. If you say we're going to taxonomize the heard experience of music through the Schenkerian theories of triadic structures in the overtone series, and that's a taxonomic grid that we drop on top of that, and then we also drop the grid of gender and racial studies on top of the same thing, and then you wind up getting something like Susan McLaren's work on gender and ideology as expressed in music theory.
Yeah.
And we don't it's not necessarily productive to think of those things as being final statements. They are expressions of resultant patterns that emerge from plopping two seemingly unrelated taxonomic structures on top of one another and then seeing what emerges. And that's part of what a systems theorist's job is to try different types of taxonomy, different types of classification, different types of order making, and put more than one together and then see what it tells you. What does it offer? What does it yield?
Yeah. Really
I
heavy.
remember once a long time ago, I was in this kind of entertaining relationship with these people at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. They had this series of seminars for very, very, very high-powered captains of industry kind of things. And somehow, I forget exactly what it was, but I'd made a contact with someone there who had basically recommended me to these people. And so they invited me to come in and just be a kind of institutional gadfly in these conversations they were having. You know, the vice president in charge of information services for McDonald's, and the senior recruitment officer in the U.S. Army, and the European vice president of the World Bank. These are all very heavy people, and they were having these get-togethers about language and education and cognitive modeling and this stuff. And uh, I asked, "What do you want me to do?" And they said, "Just wander around, and if you see a discussion that's interesting, just go in and wait until you can figure out something to say, and then say it." I was basically a free agent. So I was wandering around in these rooms, and there was a discussion. Again, there's all these very high powered suits in the room, and there's a guy who's like some corporate vice president from Pfizer Pharmaceutical who's trying to get at the root of why people hated pharmaceutical companies. Right? And all of these people are offering various things. And again, from my perspective, as like, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just a house hippie.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I think you have to look at it from the perspective is that your company, Pfizer Pharmaceutical, is at the intersection of two historical forces that have been in existence for a long time, much longer than your company has.
Yeah.
And those are two forces, both of which are negative in the public mind. And those are capitalism and the fact of sickness.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody hates capitalism except the people who are profiting from it. And even they hate it. And everybody hates getting sick. And so then what do you expect if you're at the intersection of those two forces? And everybody kind of went, huh. And I remember that in particular because I forget what the exact title was, but it was one of the heavy honchos from the World Bank. We're standing in the bathroom, and he's standing next to me at the urinal, and he says, "That was a very remarkable thing you said in there." Right? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. It seems obvious to me, but then what I keep learning, what I learn invariably over the course of my life is that over and over again, I say something that seems obvious, and everybody else acts like I've just, dropped a real pearl. And so, I mean, I guess as the Scots say, that no man can escape his weird, and I guess it's part of my weird that the things that seem obvious to me strike others with the force of revelation. I can't help it. I didn't ask for this, man. It just happened.
No man can escape his weird, WEIRD.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You taught me a good one there because that's the pharmaceutical industrial complex. That film, Nan Goldwyn, Laura Poitras's latest film is amazing. Sackler has their name on every art museum, and they invented fentanyl. And the family, you watch the end of the film, they have a Zoom with the lawyers. The family doesn't get it. They're just capitalists who invented something, and this drug went haywire or whatever. They don't like, oh my God, we did something wrong. So what? Pull our name off the art galleries. We don't care. So anyways, to go specific on two things you said there, that was really good, because when I grow up, I want to be an unconstitutional gadfly. no, an institutional gadfly. But was that more a pattern thing? Like I would show films on an art gallery wall, white wall, with a video projector, and it's an old 50s black and white film. And on the Morway kind of pattern looking in the guy's shirt, you would see color. It's a black and white film. Right. Is that our eyes making up? There's no color there. It's our eyes making up fake color, isn't it?
Well, it's our brain making it up.
Our brain is making fake color.
Yeah.
Does not exist.
It's not fake color. It's real color.
Well, it's real color, but I mean, if you re-photographed it, the camera wouldn't capture it. It'd have to be a human eye.
I think the existence of optical illusions demonstrates that it
could,
you can photograph it.
It could be captured. Okay. So, and then the other thing was I lost it. Okay. Anyways, that was really deep because it does go into you sussed out the tool, very deeply in a couple tools. Oh, I know what it was. The time thing.
Oh,
yeah. Sense of time. Okay, here we go. Both Frank Zappa and James Joyce say all times are happening now, all at onceness. Yeah, that sounds cosmic and all, but how do you suss out that statement? All times are happening now, all at onceness.
What I do when I'm faced with a statement like that is I try and look for the word or phrase that's doing the heavy lifting. And in this case, the one that's doing the heavy lifting is the word happening.
Okay.
And happening, that's a verb, and it implies a time period within which something is happening, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even describe the word without using the word. uh, and so I would say there is a form of perception in which all things are happening at once.
Yeah.
And there's another form of perception where they're not.
Yeah.
And our functionality in the world uh, may depend on our ability to move back and forth between those and various other forms of
Yeah.
temporality, so that we don't, get run over by a bus while we're contemplating the universe, and so that we know what constitutes uh, an appropriate form of interaction with our universe. If my wife asks me a question and I take 8 years to respond, that's grounds for divorce.
Wow.
Right? Now, John Cage had a beautiful quote. He said, Indian musicians long ago realized that listening to music was like looking through a window at a landscape, which didn't go away just because you turned away from the window.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, if I teach a raga, I'm introducing my student to the landscape and showing them how to parse the features of the landscape, how to interrogate the
Yeah.
landscape in a meaningful way, so that they can enjoy it when we're not enjoying it together.
Yeah. That's a brilliant Cage quote. I love that. I need that so bad. Yeah, it doesn't go away. It's still there. But Warren, your name starts with a W. I don't ask this question very often, but when I ask it, there's 5 W questions major. What, who, why, when, and where. I say, what's the most important? 90% of people go, why? I love it when someone goes, when. you know, I mean, what would you gravitate towards the most of those 5 questions? What, who, why, when, and where? What's the most important for you?
Um,
How do you spell that?
WH.
WH. But is that your made up word right now on the spot?
It's the shared suffix for all those words,
Oh, it's the shared suffix,
or prefix rather.
shared prefix. Yeah.
So, and then if I say and then I end with ut, it means an object
Yeah.
or it means a noun. If it ends with oo, then it means a living being.
Yeah.
N, it means a location in temporal space. It means a location in physical space. I, ending with that diphthong, it means a conjectural space of reason or inquiry or an attempt to locate causes.
Yeah.
But all of those things are manifestations of two tendencies. One is indicative and the other is inquisitive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Hindi, questions all begin with ka. So when you want to say, when are you coming? You say kub. But if you
Yeah.
want to say, when you arrive, you say jub. So the two are differentiated phonetically. So something that's indicative is j, and something that's inquisitive is k.
Yeah.
And what we have in our English phonetic system is that h either pushes you in an indicative direction, where you know
Yeah.
you're making an indexical point
Yeah.
somewhere, or an inquisitive direction where you're trying to establish a truth or a response.
Yeah. That's actually Donald Theo nailed McLuhan by saying he teased people to believe his percepts were concepts. So he's in the conceptual world. He's in academia, but he's a charlatan. He's just saying, he's just making up questions. And so I could use that on him. Marshall teased people to believe his indicative tendencies were inquisitive. They're actually he's after making up new questions and new metaphors.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a perfectly valid place to be.
Well, it's valid, but in academia, they'll chalk you off as a charlatan. But now sometimes they don't. But you know,
well, you look at what happened to McLuhan in academia, and the only way to process McLuhan in academia now is that you write papers on McLuhan. Right? I mean, there's all kinds of scholarly papers about McLuhan with people trying to parse out what he actually meant. You know, but I mean, at some point he's going to step out of the movie line and go, "You have completely misunderstood my work."
But dude, I was just going to tell you. Do you know the flip on that? Woody couldn't get Buñuel or Fellini, so he settled for McLuhan, and he takes a McLuhan line, which Marshall would say as a question. Do you mean my whole fallacy is wrong? That's a question. And Woody made him say it as a statement. So he revealed McLuhan to the world backwards, but another McLuhan line really nails that. Marshall said, a half a truth is still a lot of a truth. Okay. What new toy basically it was what tool do you most gravitate towards? So you sussed it out beautifully. Then someone says, well, what about a toy? So then I follow it up. It doesn't have to be a new toy. What toy do you most gravitate toward? Or what's a toy that you gravitate towards?
A toy that I gravitate towards. The word that's doing the heavy lifting there is toy. And one of the formulations is that as a grown-up, then we say, oh, look at my new toy. It's a $3,000 mixing board. And you know, someone who runs a recording studio. Yeah, I have a new toy. It's a $50,000 condenser microphone. I'm not sure if that's really a toy or not. So in that sense, I'm either surrounded by toys or I don't have any. I work with musical instruments. I build instruments out of recycled materials with my students at New England Conservatory. I use toy instruments, children's instruments, as a way of helping people free themselves of self-imposed boundaries in music making. In terms of a piece of equipment that I've been spending a lot of time with in the past 6 months, I've been involved in a podcast production team, and I do a lot of video editing. So video editing software is an amazing toy, and I love spending time with it.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's a productive way to not exactly daydream, but to fiddle around, to fuck around and find out.
Yeah. No, dude, I highly respect that, because my whole career as a filmmaker, and I'm a fake filmmaker, is that you know, you learn how to do editing, and it's like that's the last thing I want to do is sit around and edit, because it's too time consuming.
But and there you are 11 hours later adjusting things by microseconds. Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like Pennebaker told the students once, Don't ever fast forward. You know, you shoot all this footage and you have to sit there and suffer through every minute of it in order to get the good shot or
Yep.
the good subtle thing. And it's like, I'm not going to sit there and watch all that stuff. But
Yes, you will.
you know, well, no, if you're a good editor and you will, you know, yeah. But editing is a great comment, and there's a great question I have about editing down the line, but I actually asked for 90 minutes. We only got 15 more minutes, so I
Are
hope
we doing a second one?
yeah, I hope
Yeah.
we'll do an 8-part Netflix series. You're too good, dude. This is like I've hit my guru for 40 years, 1,000 interviews. But here's the next one. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't worry about anything when I go to bed at night.
Yeah.
By the time I go to bed, my body and my mind are tired, and I typically go to sleep very quickly. Yeah, much of my day, I actually, as I'm a committed climate activist.
Yeah.
So a worry is the fundamental drone over which the arcs of my activist life are carried out.
Yeah.
But activism is a way for me to do something rather than worry.
Yeah.
Worry, I believe, was defined by Ashley Brilliant as the misuse of imagination. And so I'm, back when I was worrying about climate crisis, I was miserable.
Yeah.
But now I get up every weekday morning and I do an hour of being in a vigil on the side of the road with signs about climate change. And that means that if nothing else has happened, I have done an hour of dedicated action where I essentially rent a billboard space with my body.
Yeah.
That can be seen by thousands of people every morning. And I've been doing that for 10 years.
Yeah.
Every morning, rain or shine. And so then that's a thing that I do in order that I don't have to worry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that series on your channel is amazing just to see how many there are.
So
but
you're the one viewer. Willie Schwartz is the other viewer.
Hey, I'm in good company. Come on, man.
That's right.
I'm sure there's other people, but the beauty is you're doing it live, and the kid who's born is in the mother's womb and then pops out and starts waving to you every day, and then he grows up and becomes a code, designer, and he changes.
Right.
He gets AI to solve the climate change problem. Then we're like, thank God. Okay, but at my mom's funeral service years ago, I said, everybody knew she worried too much. Okay. And I says, there's a lot of people in this room who worried that Dolores worried too much. So I was like, what's the difference between worry and concern? I mean, again, this is words, etymological breakdown. If you're concerned about somebody, that could be interpreted as worry. If you're worrying about somebody, that could be interpreted as concern. How do you suss out the difference? Is there a difference?
I would say that a word like worry exists in what might be called a pessimistic subjunctive condition.
Yeah.
And concern, in the way that I'm framing it in my own mind, is an emotional response.
Right.
And worry seems to me to be more about examining potential for future outcomes. Whereas concern is, oh, your tummy hurts now. Let me do something about it.
Yeah.
But that could be subject to revision. I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's like, I love this cliche. I love to repeat. If you gossip and you complain, you live longer. It's getting it out of your system. The two old ladies who sit in the town square and gossip and complain about everybody, they're worried and concerned about everybody. But I like your two breakdowns. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm not afraid of ideas.
That's that's the answer I get. I was waiting for you to zoom in on afraid. Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
The earliest memory that I have is a still image of the staircase in the house that my parents lived in when I was born in 1958.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Um, yes.
Yeah. You've sussed this out. You've got a lot of great interviews on YouTube and in print. You've sussed this out, but I still want to go there in our remaining few minutes. Tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
My mother had an enormous impact on my capacity for unfettered and cogent utterance. My mother loved to memorize poetry, and growing up, memorizing poetry was a thing that she and I shared in common.
Yeah.
So by the time I was a teenager, I had large swaths of poetry that were already in my muscle memory. And what that meant was that I was almost never at a loss for a an apposite phrase or a an eloquent expression.
Yeah.
And that meant that I gained a reputation for preternatural clarity of expression.
Yeah.
Um,
Kind of ironic, Warren, because did you grew up to be a singer, but are you actually singing words?
oh,
Or
yes, I'm singing words.
you're always singing words, yeah, but
I'm
they're
not
in
always singing words.
no,
Uh,
you're not always, but you are singing words, but are they in another language? They're not in English.
much of the time, the words that I sing are in the medieval dialect of Hindi called Braj,
Yeah,
Braj.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, I know what the words are, and
yeah,
I know what they mean, and I know what uh, I know what the language of emotional expression in this music is supposed to do.
yeah,
And my teacher in India, uh, my guru, was obsessed with the expressive capacity of language, and especially the expressive capacity of language used in song.
yeah,
And so he had enormous gifts of conveying emotional pictures through his singing and through the use of text. And so, for me, that's just a perfectly natural place to live.
yeah. But you don't, do you write poetry over all those years since your mom had you memorizing them? Did you write poetry much?
Little bits here and there.
Yeah, and
Not,
you never wrote rock songs, folk songs, or did you write lyrics?
I've occasionally written lyrics, but I am
Yeah,
handicapped by that same ease of utterance. So that led when I composed lyrics, that led me to a glibness of utterance that made my song lyrics mostly entertaining doggerel.
Yeah.
The There's that who's it? Was it a Jim Croce song? I forget. Whenever when I try to tell you, the words all come out wrong, so I have to say I love you in a song.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
If I'm writing prose, I can convey extremely nuanced emotional states, and writing song lyrics almost invariably leads me to writing things that are kind of in the same line as Tom Lehrer, Flanders and Swan, Roy
Oh, Tom
Zimmerman,
Lehrer. Yeah, you. I saw that name come
right?
up.
So for me, writing song lyrics has more to do with kind of existing in a Noel Coward, Cole Porter space than uh, than being in some place where the deep emotional expressions come out. And that's true even though I am extremely conscious and sensitive to emotional nuance in a song.
Yeah.
And something that I am able to do is uh, when I listen to a song by someone else, I understand at a very deep level what they are getting at.
Yeah.
And what the aim of the song is, what the emotional uh, 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 what the emotional vector of the song is.
Yeah. I interrupted you. After Tom Lehrer, you said something like Flanders. Who did you
Fla-
say after?
the English comedy duo Flanders and Swan.
Flanders and Swan? I got to look them up.
They you've probably heard the song "Mud, Mud, Glorious Mud, Nothing Quite Like It for Soothing the Blood." The song is called "The Hippopotamus." It's a great sing along. They were actually George Martin's first production contract
Wow.
before he worked with the Beatles. And Tom Lehrer used to do their songs in his act.
Whoa. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, you sussed that one out really good. Why don't we do the other one? Would be, I mean, I know there's more inside your immediate family, but what you got from your mom was so articulate and perfect. Someone outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
I would be expected to name my guru, Sri Ram Devastali, but I would like to name someone else. Um, in junior high school, the uh, the new music teacher in the school was a guy named Philip Moss. He was young. He was a kind of hip. He had a beard and longish hair, and it was eighth grade, and I it was the first year that we were allowed to choose electives, and I saw that there was a course called music listening, and I didn't know anything about anything. So I thought, sure, why not? So I signed up for that. And I was a near universal pariah in eighth grade because I was younger, smaller, and smarter than everybody else in my class. And so I was subject to the expected vigorous physical corrections from my classmates. And when I went to the first day of classes of this music listening class with our new hip music teacher, Mr. Moss, I had not displayed any musical aptitude of any sort prior to that. He came in and he said, I realized when I entered the class that there was some stuff going on that might not end well because all the kids in the class were the ones who beat me up. And it was clear that, they, I guess, expected that it was going to be a kind of a gut class where they would just get an easy, good grade. Anyway, Mr. Moss, who told us to call him Pip because his first name was Philip and he had a Dickens thing going on. He came in and he said, so what we're going to do this semester is we're going to listen to great pieces of Western classical music. He just said classical music and find out about what makes him tick. And I was, I'm in the background going, sure, whatever, I don't care. But everyone else in the room went, no, we don't want to do that. And what Pip Moss did in that moment is one of the most important events in my life. He said, "Oh, okay, what do you want to do?" And they said, "We want to listen to rock music." And he said, there was a long pause, right? And then he said, "Okay, we'll do that. The first thing you need to know if you're listening to rock music is how to count a 12-bar blues." And he went back into his office and came out with an electric bass guitar and played a blues bass line and taught us all to count it, and then went over to his record collection and began pulling out records of rock and roll and said, "This is a blues, let's count it together." And so that taught me two things. One is that, first off, I didn't realize that teachers could do that, right? Teachers don't normally do that. They don't normally say, "I've worked all summer on this fucking lesson plan. You're going to take Mozart and like it." And he said, "Okay, fine, we'll do that." And we did that. And then the second thing was that he was prepared to do that.
Yeah.
He took that response, which was an emotional response from kids who didn't want to have to do any work. And he said, "Okay, you asked that question, you get it. Now you're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to learn how to count the blues." And then he did a survey of American popular music that started with Robert Johnson and the Carter family and brought us up to the present day, including my first exposure to Zappa. My first
Wow.
exposure to Zappa was in a music class in junior high school. He played "Who Are the Brain Police," and I went, "Holy shit!" And
Shit.
that was the first record I ever bought.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
Right. And to this day, I mean, I can still do all the voices, da, 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 right? And it's because of that. And there's a nice sideline to that story. Many years later, I wrote a little blog post about that moment and how it was important. And I sent a copy of it to my old teacher, and he responded with an email, and he said, "Wow, I had no idea. I mean, we were all just kind of scrambling to make things right by the end of the day. And it's so remarkable." And then the good part of the story hasn't arrived yet. One of my students shows up and he says, "I play chamber music with this guy in Lincoln." And we went to his house to do some string quartet playing, and he was in this really good mood, and he said, "I just got an email from an old student of mine who, when I was teaching in the elementary or in the junior high school," and he told this story, and then he read out my email, and my student said to him, "He's my teacher at NEC, and he tells that story in class."
Oh my God.
Right. So it's a nice demonstration of, in that sense, everything is happening all at once.
That's a perfect. And Frank inventing new questions. Frank didn't go, "Oh, the brain police are the evil capitalist consumers, or the brain police are the voice inside your head." He just asked the question, "Who are the brain police?"
Right.
It left it open. What an amazing teacher, Philip Moss.
Yeah.
That Pip.
Pip.
Pip really did it.
Pip
Yeah.
Moss. Yeah. And interestingly enough, three of the people who passed through his music classes at Brooks Junior High School in Lincoln went on to become Hindustani musicians. I have no idea why, but there it is.
Wow. Well, we want to thank Willie Schwartz for introducing me to you. And that's amazing because there's something about this. And, the other guy I interviewed was Ja Utah.
Yeah.
These people who are like Western music 60s, and then they go, whoop, and then they find this.
Yeah. I was 17 when I first heard Indian vocal music and went, "Okay,
Yeah.
now I guess I know what I want to do."
Yeah.
Um, my formal musical study really began as a teenager studying Western music and Indian music simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a question of trying to make sense of Indian music within the framework that I'd already received. because
Yeah.
I grew up musically. I grew up by musical.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the names you said, we're growing up with 60s radio and we're hearing Desmond Decker, the Israelites, and it's reggae music. Well, we didn't call it reggae music. We called it transistor radio. We heard Mighty Mouse singing opera. We heard Oh Happy Day by Edwin Hawkins singing gospel. This was all just music. It wasn't genre sized yet.
Right. Well, when I was 9 years old, I was perusing a local classified ad publication. It was called the Want Advertiser, and it had a lot of things. People selling stuff. It was basically Craigslist. It was a print Craigslist, and I saw something that said 78 RPM record player and records $5. And I said to my dad, "Look at that." And he said, "That's impossible." And I said, "Well, here it is." And he said, "Call the person up. If it's real, I'll buy it for you." And I did, and it was, and he did. And so I grew up, I was a 9-year-old with a Victrola. And so for me, I was as likely to listen to, Roy Acuff or, Guy Lombardo and his Royal Canadians or whatever was on the 78 RPM records that I got. As I was to, listen to the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or whatever else was going on. I didn't see any kind of distinction. I always had a Victrola. Doesn't everybody have a Victrola?
I can't. If you ever come to Venice, you got to go over to my friend. He has every recording device in the history of the world, like a lathe to cut a cylinder in player piano and 78s. But Warren, this has truly been delightful. One of the best in my 40 years interviewing people, and I really appreciate your time and energy. And all your spunk and what you have going on YouTube is amazing because I can feel the crossover from music, teaching music, activism, in linguist and everything, and it's all one. It's just breathing, and it's really come across deeply for me in this time.
But
So
yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight. Only when love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever truly done for heaven and the future's sakes.
who says that, Warren?
That's Robert Frost, Two Tramps in Mud Time.
Two Tramps, that's Robert Frost.
Yeah, Two Tramps in Mud Time. That's the closing two stanzas of that poem.
That is beautiful because one of my favorites is a person came up to Robert Frost and goes, "What does that poem mean?" And Robert said, "You mean you want me to say it worse?" Warren, it's been a delight, and I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, but I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever, and we plan a part 2 down the line. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Jerry. Great time talking to you.
Love you, dude. Thank you.
Be well. Bye-bye now.
Bye.